Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Larry Rhodes.
And I'm John Clark. And we want to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you will find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs. Today is September 10th, 2013, and this is a call-in show. We invite your calls to the number shown below.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup that often meets at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup will be for happy hour and dinner after the show, for food, drink, and conversation. And Friday, we meet for happy hour at the Beard and Beer Market. To find us at either one of these places, look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with a lively roundtable discussion. The second Sunday is book club. The fourth Sunday is reflections gathering, which is a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home.
Okay. Today we'll be talking about evolution and the evidence for it. But first, in the news. An 8-year-old Yemen girl dies at the hands of her husband. Yes, I said husband, on their wedding night. Rawan, an 8-year-old Yemeni child bride, has died from internal injuries sustained during her wedding night due to sexual trauma. Rawan was forced to marry a man believed to be around 40 years old. And activists are now calling for the beastly groom and the girl's family to be arrested and face justice in the courts. The hope is that this case could be used to help put an end to child marriages, a common practice in the country. And this is just one more death that can be laid at the feet of religion. Al-Bawadba points out that the main obstacle is that there is no definition of child, offering little protection for those being affected. In February 2009, a law set 17 as the minimum age for marriage, but the law was repealed after lawmakers dubbed it un-Islamic. The Parliament Constitutional Committee is believed to review and make a final decision on this legislation later this month. However, many believe, regardless of the law, education is the most necessary tool, as many parents are illiterate and do not understand the repercussions of forcing young girls to have sex. According to the United Nations Population Fund, more than 140 million girls will become child brides between now and 2020. Of the 140 million girls forced to marry before 18, 50 million will be under the age of 15. The practice of child brides eliminates the opportunities for these girls to experience further education, as well as subjecting them to emotional and sexual trauma. And before Christians get to feeling too superior over this, just think of all the laws in America that are being challenged every day as being non-Christian, and how much harm could be done to our citizens if those laws were successfully overturned. And we will allow people to call in later on during the show and tell us which laws they think might be the best examples of that.
Right, and this kind of comes up, I guess, all the time now. We've picked this one, or I guess you found it. And how do you? I'm trying to think of a way to apologize for to explain myself if I were the family in question.
The which family? The family of the girl, or the family of?
I guess of the girl. If I was a citizen of the area,
It was Allah's will. I mean, that's the only explanation they could come up with.
Right, and then you've got a question. How do you raise children? How much responsibility do you actually have over them? How much of their life is yours if you're the parent? And we ask this question a lot here in this country. We've had lately several things. I mean, there's always something. Got 300-something million people. There's always something to pick on. But, when do you tell someone that their belief or way of life is hazardous to their child's health? And when does that, I guess, start to capsize their religious liberties?
Well, think of all the religions that don't allow children to have blood transfusions or even medical attention at all.
Right.
Christian Scientists come in later, and who was the first that don't allow blood transfusions? I can't think of the Latter-day Saints.
Jehovah's
Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, surely when you hear that, I mean, if we were to fashion the subject slightly different and not pin it on religion per se, but just a cultural influence, it does sound like to most people you're saying that I don't have this control over my child, and I guess I would have to say, yeah, I am saying that.
Yeah, well, I think that the society that you live in, and the government particularly, that is tasked with protecting its own citizens, should have the ability to step in and protect that child from the malicious non-intent or intent from his parents. Now, let's say that you decided you wanted to pull your kid out of school. I'm not talking about sending it to a parochial school or just homeschooling. I'm just saying pulling it out of school.
Right.
Well, the state would step in and say, no, this child has to have the opportunity to be educated in some kind of system. I mean, we as a society owe this child an education. But if you could do that under a religious vein, you would have a very good chance of getting away with it.
Right. I guess I would kind of point my grandfather's generation, or really right before him, guys were quitting school and going to work. And actually, my stepfather had been pulled out of school when he was in 8th grade. I mean, you're probably similar aged, and it impacted him dramatically. Sure. I mean, I could, I'm not really going to divulge his life on TV, but it clearly had an impact.
I'm sure.
And he did make it, though. He
Well, now
served as a citizen.
But compare that to a child's health.
Oh, right.
I mean, they might be able to pick up an education on their own with the internet and all this stuff now. Their access to information is greatly improved over times 50 years ago. But if you try to withhold medical help from your child, you are much more culpable to the downside of his health in the future. Not just in the immediate effects, but the long-term effects too. And I think that the society and the government has the responsibility to step in and ensure at least a minimal level of care.
Right. Well, I mean, this isn't just our problem that we have here. But
Excuse me.
anyways, for example, I was going to bring up, I probably won't go into detail with it now, but in July, Bermuda passed legislation that the Human Rights Amendment Act, which bans discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. So when you think about that, this is closely related. You've got a way of life, and then what people they're having an awareness that some cultures, religions influence the way we treat others, and that some of these things are negative, which is kind of what we're talking about here. But, this is happening everywhere, and at least in the modern world, first world, probably second world, third world, obviously is happening, but to what extent and how that, I mean, it's just such a complicated situation. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to get into that too much, but, you're trying to defend the rights of people, and I think it was Germany recently acknowledged a sex on child's birth certificate or at the birth of a child, to where it's not male or female, but indeterminate, I believe, right? But it's restricted to certain conditions. I can't remember what they are, but it would be certain medical cases, I imagine, some type of your typical, I think they call it super sex traits. But
interesting.
The two are fighting each other, and where do we draw the line and say that a person can be so religious that their religion trumps this? I mean, obviously we don't allow sacrifices and such.
Right. But you look at something like Jim Jones's sect. His religious freedom was so important to him and his followers that they left the country. They went to South America, Jonesboro, created their own little town, and the brunt of his teachings did not just affect the adults in the crowd. Excuse me. The lemonade, or what do you call it, Kool-Aid service went all the way to every child in the sect, and everyone died. It's not the child's fault; it's the adult's fault. And if they live in a society where adults are going to do things like that, then we need to have some kind of minimal care.
I mentioned this.
That doesn't happen again.
I mentioned it once in a show, and I may have actually recalled who said it, but we're the stewards of children, not necessarily. They're not property in the way that my laptop here is property.
Right.
And it was a Christian who had said that, and I can't remember who it is for the life of me right now. But I liked the way that went about. We're stewards.
Right.
We're simply
even the government recognizes that in their guardianship role. I mean, if you're not supplying the proper education, medical, or food for your child, they can't take that child away from you and give it to a legal guardian. But it's harder to do if you claim religious rights, or your religious rights being infringed upon.
And it's even harder when they get entangled. I would venture into the territory of certain daycare facilities in the States where it's a religious facility, and somehow garners the trust of the government and conflates these issues, and eventually what you have is two standards for daycares, one for everyone else, and then one for the religious.
You got the government. If it's a government faith-based initiative daycare, you got the government's rules, you got the religious rules of the daycare itself, and then you have the religious beliefs of the people that are bringing in there, which may or may not match directly the facilities.
Well, this is getting
beliefs.
Just insanely complicated already. And our topic today, we got a few more news bits, but our topic, just to mention, we're going to talk about how microbes can influence the evolution of people commonly say, well, microevolution, I believe in little changes, but not macroevolution. Well, human evolution, for example, could be selected for certain things like dietary needs and whatnot, can be selected because of a geological event, but it could also be changed because of something going on in your gut. And, our laws, think of our law as an organism, right? The country can be infected by certain ideas. We would say, I think, infected by memes, particularly religious ones. We're susceptible to, just like an organism is susceptible to these types of selection mechanisms. But
Richard Dawkins wrote a book about that. Can't remember the name of it, but he actually Richard Dawkins created the word meme.
Right, the selfish gene, I think, was where meme was coined.
Okay, and he was talking about how ideas can be passed on down through a population just the same as genes can.
Well, yeah, I mean, think of an idea like groupthink in a racial segregation situation.
As simple as wearing your hat backwards.
Right. Well, I was going to say how could it actually influence genetics too. Again, I'm probably going to bring up later on about how different our microbes are in our guts. But Africa is a country that's been studied extensively regarding human genetics because of the variation we see in the genome across the country. And particularly Africans and African Americans, that these genes vary greatly and have than they do in other cultures. For example, Europe. Well, geographically is usually the way we think of it. Europe, the western part of the globe, Asia, India, and well, I forgot where I was going with that, but.
Talking about how the genes change or infect.
Oh, right, yeah.
Society.
So even then, you could have. Well, we have a geological barrier in our country, so we don't mate with this other tribe. But we may also have a cultural reason not to. Certainly the case places here in the South. I mean, across even, the first world here in America. And but obviously not as much of an impact as it would have had hundreds of years ago. And that impact can be seen today when these studies, like one of the people I'd like to mention is Dr. Bushman of the University of Pennsylvania, who studied a large number of microbes over human cells, and during this talk had a partner, Tishkoff, who had a paper, The Genetic Structure and History of Africans and African Americans, And what you'll see is that the Africans that domesticated cattle were lactose tolerant. And so they could drink the milk of another animal without much difficulty, whereas I think Asians are typically lactose intolerant, if I'm not mistaken. And I can't tell you why right off the top of my head, but there's probably a good reason there. Just the same as for the selection for the lactose tolerance in the case of a cattle herding group of people.
So what you're saying is that you have small changes, which we refer to as micro changes. But if you get enough micro changes over time, it will change the species so that they can no longer interbreed and they can actually become a different species, a different type of animal altogether.
Right.
But as evolutionists or evolutionary biologists, they don't recognize that there's micro and macro evolution. They don't call them the same thing. I mean,
correct.
They don't use those terms, and they don't really recognize that any such thing as macro evolution occurs, because it's all micro changes over time that eventually accumulate.
I would think that in talking about it, you would eventually have to talk about it in two ways, only because, though, that in one instance I'm talking about whether or not a group of people or a group of organisms has selected for a trait. So, well, let's use our lactose tolerance. In that case, you would be talking about a smaller change, although the same type of change that leads to something such as divergent species.
But it's this slow accumulation of changes that make that happen.
And for a lot of people around here, I guess the majority of our callers that may want to call in and debate some of these topics see the idea of an old Earth, a 4 or 5 billion year old Earth, as something that's not possible, or that for some people they'll say, well, that's necessary so that you can make the argument that evolution occurs.
And we will.
Well, but I mean, even before, yeah, and we will, but even before that, you could make the argument independently. I think you'd mentioned some things about dating. Geologists had long known about the different layers and whatnot. Now, as far as how much time it took, they probably didn't know early on. We're talking pre-Darwin and but they knew it was quite a long time. And I think even before Darwin, maybe some tectonic plate ideas or had come about, trying to say these things happen over immense periods of time, while they didn't put a number to it. And then I don't know specifically what came across the first thing to put a number to it, but I know the idea of radiometric dating has shed a lot of light in this area. And of course, for those of you at home, if you don't know, you may have heard of carbon dating, and
we'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the show.
Okay.
Did you have a piece of news, or did you get through it?
Oh, yeah. Let me, I guess we can go right back to our the next bit of news here. As you can tell, we're just kind of throwing things together for the good old show today. So, let's see. It's more important to do what is right by God than by my constituents. And this was by Kyle...
Jason Rappert.
Oh, Jason Rappert. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is Right Wing Watch. Kyle is the one who wrote about it. In August, at Arkansas Faith to Action banquet featuring, among others, an Arkansas State Senator, Jason Rappert. This is the man responsible for the passage of the state's heartbeat bill over the governor's veto. During his remarks at the banquet, Rappert stated that it is not the will of the 80,000 constituents that he represents, but rather the will of God, because there's only one vote that matters, and that's when I stand before the Lord at the judgment seat. Is it going to be a seat? That's a good question. Anyway, if anybody knows.
Who knows?
It's more important to do what is right by God, Rappert said, than it is to please those who would rather have me talk about pro-life, but not really do much about pro-life. He then went on to discuss the recent showdown in Texas over its own restrictive abortion legislation, saying that of those who were protesting the legislation, I've never had a glimpse of hell or heard a real demon, but I believe that that must be what they sound like. It's spiritual warfare. Well, besides being like crazy talk, this man admits that he doesn't care what his constituents think. He's going to do what his particular version of God wants. Humanity be damned, quite literally. I certainly hope that his constituents remember his words when they go to the polls on his next election cycle, and I'm thinking that they will. I'm thinking that a lot of them will enjoy that, despite... I mean, when you think about it, when you say, my God, what do you mean? Yeah. You go around here, we already know there's more denominations of, and this is Christianity, than there are verses in the Bible, right? I mean, that... Which God?
Every believer carries his own version of God around. He emphasizes his own traits, his own passages in the Bible, ignores others. They cherry pick, and who knows what this particular person is going to represent as God's will when he's in office. He's already decided that he's going to just throw out the oath that he took when he took the office, which was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. He doesn't care about that. All he cares about is representing his God in front of the government.
Yeah, and he knows that the people want to hear it, or at least a good portion of the votes that he wants to claim, and just throws it out there. I don't know. It's just hard for me to fathom. I mean,
he knows that God sells, and when he says the word God, every one of his constituents who actually support him are thinking of their God. He's projecting a word that everybody picks up on their radar as my God. So he's just riding a wave of credulity that's going to bite him eventually. We can hope.
Well, do you want to go into the dating methods that you grabbed a few things for?
For evolution to work, there has to be time for evolution to work. We've got a geologic column image I'd like to throw up. This shows basically how we can determine the age of the Earth. Now, this is just one method, by the fossil method, and you'll notice at a certain point everything is below water. I mean, our life on Earth came from the oceans, and it was for the longest time before life even appeared in the ocean. There was like 1 billion years when it was nothing more than single-celled life, or even just chemicals.
Yeah, that's a very difficult time to understand about, because a lot of those things are so small that they didn't leave fossils.
Right. Hard to get a fossil of an amoeba.
Right. I mean, we may find chemical means to determine, what was there before by replicating it.
There were stromatophores and things that we can find that are left over of colonies of these things. But the thing to remember is that in the Bible, God created heavens and earth, and then he created life, and he brought men up like all within the day, 6,000 or 10,000 years ago. It didn't say anything about creating life in the oceans and it being there for billions of years, or hundreds of millions of years anyway, before they even showed up on the land. There's the column. Here's the thing about it is, the geologic column, younger layers of stone and dirt overlay older layers of dirt and stone. The farther you go back, farther back in time we go. It's like in space. And that's a trend
as well. I mean, there are obvious exceptions to this. Certain plates that will interact, or landslides.
Yeah, but those things are well understood by geologists, and they know what to look for.
Because they, too, have trends. And every time you see one of those, you rest assured you're going to see these little trends that follow.
Right. It's like in space. The farther away something is, the older it is. Some objects in space are so old that's all that left of them is the image that you're seeing. They don't actually exist anymore. Let's get started on some of the dating methods used by science. One of the quickest or earliest dating methods is tree rings, or dendrochronology. And even that, just tree rings, can take us back 10,000 years.
10,000?
Yeah.
What, you mean more than 6,000?
Yeah, more than 100 years away. But you say, how can tree rings take us back even more than 1,000
I am so
years?
Tempted to just stop us right there and demand a call to debate that issue alone. I mean... If we can take back that far with tree rings, and I'm assuming some of those are going to be petrified forest, but some of those are living trees or recently deceased trees that have literally lived that long.
Right.
So what do you say to that? I mean,
well, it's just the devil put them there to make us seem like it. And, of course, God would let him do that to deceive us so that we would lose our souls.
I do kind of want to play around with it a bit, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, a tree ring, what is that? We've got a cycle of seasons, a cycle of growth, and it leaves its track in the rings of a tree.
Right. And
so, I mean, you would have to say that the cycles happened at different rates. I don't know, the Earth sped around the sun faster, or you have to come up with some really fantastic
to get
observations. As Carl Sagan would say, superior claims
require superior evidence.
Yeah, ridiculous amounts of evidence. So I would be anxious to hear those types of evidences just based on the tree rings.
Mm-hmm. Right. And getting into even the next level of dating is carbon dating. Carbon dating can be used to measure all the way back to 60,000 years using, excuse me.
Well, it's a proportion. It's a proportion of one ice. Okay, you got it.
Half-life of carbon-14 decaying into carbon-13 in organic matter. They can be contaminated, so care has to be taken, and sometimes scientists have mistakenly supported claims that weren't, but other scientists stepped in and corrected it. It's still a valid, reliable means of dating organic material, but it's only used in material found in the topmost sedimentary layers of rock, not used on colder diamond levels like creationists say. Human DNA. It mutates at a fairly consistent rate and can be used back to 150,000 years. And it doesn't lead back to Mount Ararat 4,000 years ago, but to Africa around 50,000 years ago, 50 to, say, 100,000, just as other dating methods suggest.
Well, real quick. You've mentioned three types, molecular dating, and we got a phone call, so we'll go ahead and take our caller.
Okay.
Don't know. Yeah. Hello, caller. This is Freethought Forum. You're live on the air. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
You can just MC's my name.
MC.
Yes.
All right, MC. What can we?
I have a question. I guess we're talking about here creation versus evolution, evolution versus creation. I'm watching your program. One question you might could answer for me. Where did life come from?
Well, that's not a question of evolution. That's a question of abiogenesis. So I don't know the answer to that. Do you know?
No, they're working on it. They have several good theories that they're working on, but nobody knows at this point where life originated. It may have been chemicals that have worked their magic up on Mars and then been hit by an asteroid and made their way to Earth, which is much more habitable.
We can take this in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, but
what do you think about?
Question.
I just want to stick with I don't know as my answer. How does that sound?
Well, now wait a minute. What about saying that life came from God?
Okay, so now we're talking about creation. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to prove that God exists, or at least show that God exists, and then you have to prove which God it is, because there's like 10,000 different gods that people worship on Earth.
Well, you know what? I kind of want to. Let's say I give you.
You're assuming that God doesn't exist.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on. Let's just take the argument from fine. God exists. God created it. What's the next step?
Well, my question to you is, where did life come from? I mean,
I already told you the answer to that.
If you can't, give God credit, or at least wonder about this, what is your answer?
Well, well, no, I'm not gonna. I don't want to go that far yet. But I'm just gonna say I don't know, and because I don't know, I'm not gonna pick an answer, because that would be rather arrogant of me.
Yeah. Well, for those who would believe in creation, they would say that God created.
Okay.
If that is not if that is not correct, and he said what God or who God or what, if we're assuming Christianity, the one Christian
Why would you
God,
assume that? Why would you assume that?
Okay, well, let's not.
You're talking about assuming.
Hang on.
You're assuming that God didn't create life.
We're saying we don't know.
No, we're saying that we don't know. I mean, everybody. Hang on, real quick, MC. Let me lay something down. Everybody that has been on this show that I know of would answer to that question, I don't know. They wouldn't make a claim that we know God didn't do it. And that's part of what atheism is. We don't have a belief in the God. We're rejecting the claims of many of them, but we don't have a belief in a God. That's just simply it.
Okay, well that's okay.
Yeah.
But what is your belief? I mean, you've got to credit life coming from somewhere.
No, I don't. No, especially.
Well, how did life get here? I mean,
we don't know. How many times how many different ways?
Here's my question, MC. Why is I don't know not good enough for you?
Oh no, it's good enough for
me. No,
you're
sitting here giving us hell on the show right now because
no, I'm not doing that.
Oh, yes, you are. Restate the claim then. Restate the claim that you made a second ago and ask the question again. I tell you, I don't know. You say.
Okay, I'm looking at your chart. I'm simply looking at your chart going back.
That's an evolutionary chart,
and I understand where you're coming from there.
Okay,
but it would appear to me that there would be some point in time where you could credit life.
I agree with you 100% there. And what does the evidence tell us? That's where we get the chart from. At the point where we have something which actually informs our views, we will use that to make the decisions afterwards. Now, you look at this chart back here. We've got the Precambrian right here, and we've got I don't know exactly how the Jurassic fits in there. I'm not a
paleontologist.
Yeah, I'm not a paleontologist, but we're talking about we have evidence which leads us to these conclusions, okay, and these things lead us to theories, and those things inform us on reality. Now, my argument against creation, I don't know if that's what you want to hear, but my argument against creation is you're making claims to which you don't have evidence for. And why would you do that?
Well, I'm not making a claim to that.
Okay, right. You haven't made that claim.
Well, is there not a creator? Some life came from some...
We don't know that there is one or not.
Yeah, I don't know. It would seem reasonable to think, though, that life had an origin, and it would seem reasonable to think that Earth had an origin. It would seem reasonable to think that the star had an origin or galaxy. But as we keep going back further and further, and even if it's reasonable to think that our universe had an origin, there is a point where I have to say I don't know, and it seems to be that you're correct me if I'm wrong. You're trying to say where did everything come from. And I'm going to say I don't know. And I'm going to answer one of your questions where you said, doesn't it lead that the Creator created something? And that's where I'm going to say no. And the reason for that is because I don't know. What if we are a universe that bounces, as they say, back and forth? Well, if that's the case, is there even going to be evidence left for us to find out? I don't know the answers to any of these things. And so my claim is that I don't have a claim. I just simply state I don't know.
One thing I'd like to say is you continually go back to this word creator. Now, that's a loaded word. It begs the question, that there is a creator. You're assuming a creator in using that word alone.
Right. That would be our criticism of it.
Well, let's say this. Let's say, was there an intelligent force?
Well, I don't know about that either. I mean, let me ask you.
Changing the word.
The universe, is it an accident? I mean, it seems that there is some kind of an order to the universe.
Well, okay.
And that would sort of...
I like this. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, you said accident, and then you said order, and I'm going to agree with you here. The Earth forming together, having an atmosphere that keeps it warm for a long, long time, and we get instead of cooling off quickly, and we get all these cool things that happen, which probably, so this will kind of be an answer to one of your questions, formed life here. That is an extreme amount of order, and I don't disagree with that argument at all. Now, is there a reason to think that order is occurring? Yeah. We think that some of the primal forces that we know of, like gravity, and if you break some of these other forces down, which I could not get into detail for you, we think that this is what it is. But that's not spontaneous generation. That has selection mechanisms that I'm going to say evolve, at least along the lines of non-organic life.
Well, let me just say,
instead of trend, but
if the time to believe something is when the evidence presents itself to believe it. If you've got evidence for a creator, an intelligent being that brought the universe and or Earth or life together, bring it. Bring the evidence.
Well, wouldn't there be a first cause? Let's get to that. Let's go to the first cause.
Okay. I think we addressed that, though. I think we're saying...
And you're not answering our questions
I think we're saying, yeah, you're kind of ducking us, but first cause, I don't know. But I'm also saying, if you say there is a first cause, I'm criticizing you saying, how do you know that?
And even if you do, and you're going to say it's God, wouldn't God have a cause?
Well,
what's that cause?
No, I'm not going to say. I'm saying here, there is a cause for everything that exists, right?
I don't know that. And do you think that?
Well, now wait a minute. You mean the universe, is there not some force, some cause that there is life, that there is being, that we exist?
I don't know. How can I answer your question? I don't have any information that informs me on that.
We can only say it so many ways.
Yeah. I mean, here's my question, okay? If I say I don't know, and you said you were fine with that, let's say somebody comes across and says, I know exactly how it was done. Todd did it, and he did it with a magical wand. You would look at him like he was crazy. So let's say we don't mock religious views, and let's say we look at it as we're actually trying to answer this, and you come up with an idea of a God, and we're going to stick with just deism here. Why does it have to be that is even the case? I just don't.
And why?
What information informs that view? And if it seems to me the information that informs that view is mostly a human observation, and that observation is that I can build stuff. I could build this laptop. I mean, I can't, but someone can, or some people can. Maybe even no one can, but it takes a group of us, and we build it. And when we look back on the world and the universe, and we kind of say, some of the people that fall in this trap say someone must have built that. But what informs that view? I have information that informs the view on this laptop. I don't have information that informs this view of a creator. So I'm going to have to turn that back around on you and ask, if there was a creator and if someone thinks there's a creator, why? Why think that?
Well, we do exist, don't we?
It appears so.
I believe Descartes said I am.
I will give you that one. Yeah. I'll go ahead and, yeah.
We do exist. So we came from somewhere, didn't we?
I don't know. I mean, I came from somewhere.
We came from somewhere. We'll give you that.
Larry came from somewhere.
I mean, if we exist, I believe
right.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a huge jump to say a magical man in the sky created us.
Well, technically, he didn't say a magical man.
Well, he might as well.
Well, we'll see. We'll see where. I want to see where MC takes us.
We've gone way past our mid-program break, and we probably needed to.
Yeah, can you pause for a second, MC, and can we keep him on while we do this?
I think so.
Yeah, I can pause.
All right, just keep it on the, and we'll get through this real quick.
Okay.
In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions.
Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television. You can also see it streaming online outside the Knoxville area. Just go to ctvknox.org. This is a call-in show, and we are live today, September 10th, 2013, and viewers can call in now to the number on the screen.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week, and we have evening meetups for fun, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to the atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
ASK purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
Okay.
Oh, did you just read that? Okay. The Irrationalist of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subject topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for a book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where if you don't believe in God, you'll find that you're not alone. We're going to skip the videos. I think this time we're running a little low.
And Ron Burgundy will say anything that you put on that teleprompter.
Yeah.
But right now, we currently do have a caller on the line, MC, and MC is throwing us, I believe, the cosmological argument. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
MC.
That's right, cosmological argument.
There we are.
I go along with that.
All right.
And there's a couple of other arguments I could get with, but I would... really, you don't believe in God. You're an atheist, and so that's all right.
Right.
But we know you exist, I exist, and somewhere life came from what?
Okay, well, here's the thing. You don't believe in evolution, I assume.
Well, it doesn't matter whether I believe in it or not. Where did life start?
Yes, it does. Because we believe that we came through this process. The humans arrived through this process here.
Right.
And that's our belief. Now, we'd like to know where you believe. What's your belief?
Oh, okay. Let's go with your process here, that you believe that if that process is correct, let's go all the way to the bottom of that process.
Okay.
Something had to be there in the beginning.
Yeah,
something
we concede.
did.
Yeah, we concede that.
What's your evidence that something was an intelligent agent? What's your evidence?
What's your evidence that it's not? I'm looking at your chart, and your chart seems to be, a fairly well-constructed chart. So if that chart is true and you go back, then you had to start somewhere.
Okay,
Self-replicating
really
RNA
quickly.
and DNA molecules.
Hang on. No, because then he'll just ask what came before that. MC.
Chemicals, atoms.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. MC. All right. We're presenting a model for what causes the divergence of species, what causes information in our genes to be added to the information that's already there. We're trying to explain the complexity of life, and we're using the information that has informed us of that view. What you're talking about, what you're asking us to give you, does not exist right now. We have an idea called abiogenesis, and it used to actually be there were other names for it. Philosophers of way back would come up with ideas for these first causes, this where does life come from, and that's it. That's all that's there. We've got some chemists that have replicated certain things in the lab with proteins, with chemicals that we think were on the very primitive Earth. But what you're asking for, it's simply not there. I mean, I don't know what I can tell you other than I don't know.
And when we ask you, you just say something.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. You just said that does not exist there in his statement there. What did he say did not exist now?
The information, the evidence which can give me an answer to your question
does not exist.
Correct.
Well, we have
to formulate something as powerful as the theory of gravity or the theory of evolution. That information is not there. We do have information that gives us hypotheses such as abiogenesis and the chemical origins of life. I mean, look at the outer layer of a cell, the double phospholipid bilayer that's around the nucleus of a cell, for example. We have really good ideas about how these things came into being, but what you're asking, where does RNA, DNA...
Let me interrupt you there just a moment.
Go ahead.
You had some real good ideas. Well, give me one of your ideas as to where you think this came
You give us one of yours.
No, it's fine.
He hasn't given us anything.
It's fine, though. It's fine, though. I mean, I know you're getting frustrated,
no, I'm not frustrated.
Actually, I'm talking to Larry. Larry's getting frustrated. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm hopping in. I can answer your questions all day up until a point. And I'm trying to tell you that when you keep asking that point, you're going to find that I don't know the answer, and you're going to have to deal with the fact that I don't know. But I will give you one of those bits that I was talking about. Let's talk about the membrane of mitochondria, right? This is the energy house of the cell in, I believe, all eukaryotic cells. This mitochondria is basically a primitive bacteria that has been enveloped by an early cell, which had a phospholipid bilayer as a membrane. And we know this because the evidence suggests around mitochondria is you have hang on a second. Chemical electrical processes that occur across the membrane of this mitochondrion that yield ATP molecules, which is energy for a cell. And when you look at the membrane, it's a double phospholipid bilayer, just like the membrane around a nucleus, double phospholipid bilayer. How did that happen? It was probably some sort of endocytosis of the cell as it swallowed a bacterium. So that would be evidence which yields that. But your next question, you know, we already know you're going to, where did that come from? Where did this come from? I have no doubt that life itself had origins. I have no doubt that it began even at a specific point even. But there were going to be many of these points and processes, very likely. And here's my question is, where does anyone else get any other possible idea right now other than I don't know or that chemical beginnings? That what would be your next question?
Okay, well, what about intelligent design?
What about it?
Well, I'm asking you, what do you think about intelligent design?
Give us some evidence, we'll evaluate it.
You tell me what the evidence is, and I'll tell you what I think about it.
Well, I would think that an intelligent being or something that exists that was intelligent enough to design the universe.
And why would you think that?
Well, don't you think it's pretty complicated? You just went through a long explanation to me using a lot of scientific quotes.
MC, I already conceded that point. Okay, I talked about the laptop. I talked about the complexity of a laptop and the complexity of a planet or a galaxy. The difference is there are natural laws which show that a galaxy can form. There are natural laws which show that, hey, phospholipids, when they get together, form a bilayer. It happens in water. We can replicate these things. What you're asking to replicate, at least in some sort of observational manner, is an intelligent agency creating this life. You don't have that. You haven't submitted the evidence for that, and so therefore, your whole case is null and void. Where is the evidence? I need evidence.
Well, you have presented no evidence that there is not.
On the contrary, I did. I've already told you that in a lab we have replicated phospholipid bilayers. We have an in-depth, a thorough amount of evidence on, for example, mitochondria being enveloped by an early cell. What you're saying is that we don't have evidence for an idea that you haven't even told me which one I have yet. I'm not rejecting your claim out of some sort of dogma. I'm saying saying I don't know, and that there's no evidence being presented. But I've presented you evidence for literally every single thing I've mentioned so far. Which part did I not present evidence for?
Well, let me ask this question, a very simple question. We came from something. Now, let's not argue about what we came from.
Okay, fine.
But the universe came into existence.
Oh, did it now?
Well, it exists, doesn't it?
Sure does. But this is where we're different. This is where you and I are now, and the rest of us here are quite separate. You're saying that the universe couldn't have always existed. You're saying it had a creator. Why?
Well, has it always existed?
I don't know.
Well, if you don't know, do you have any evidence that it hasn't always existed?
I don't have any evidence to whether it has always existed, to whether it's still existing from an earlier point that started it. I could present evidence back as far as, I don't know, a high school physics teacher might venture, but after that, you're going to need a physicist on here to start talking. And I'm only going to go.
Time for another call.
Well, I was just saying, let me say this one thing quickly here. This would,
I know you want to.
Maybe at some point in time when there was nothing, that something appeared, and that something is the center of the universe.
Okay, well,
and the universe developed outward from that something in the middle, that one source.
Okay, let me say that you aren't basing that on anything other than speculation.
That's right. That's right.
And where I would, MC, where I would just say, I don't know, you decide to speculate. And I'm saying you have no reason to speculate other than to... I mean, where are you getting by speculating? All that we've done...
I'm asking a question about that. Could that be possible?
Oh, now that's a totally... See, I like this. Be careful, though, because tons of... Oh, you guys don't like... They want me to drop you, man. I'm having a ball with this, but... Because there's other callers, you know?
Oh, you want to get rid of me? Okay, I'll let you go today, and I'll call you back again sometime.
All right, man. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, okay. Bye.
Well, I think... I know that was hard, but if you're at home watching that, it was kind of like a broken record. And this argument just kept going.
Well, he just kept demanding answers from us and not supplying any of his own, and claiming the high ground that he had reason to believe that there was a creator on no other reason than he wanted to.
For those of you who may not have seen the show many times before, this is a caller that has called before, and so some of us know more about the caller than others. And but technically, on the show today, I don't think he made too many claims. He just asked a bunch of questions.
Right.
And I believe what his intention was to show that I don't know, or at least to try to get me to say something that I knew that I really couldn't provide evidence for. And MCU failed in that regard. And but please call again next time. You'll have another chance to do it, because I'm here all week. But. I mean, this is what I see a lot, and in apologetics, particularly Christian apologetics and whatnot. It's just this: you guys have a dogma. You guys, no, we don't. We just don't know. We're just being honest. Don't know that.
Well, let me go ahead and read some of the other things that I had here. One thing about science is that it converges on truth over time, but religion diverges and splinters over time.
Really quickly, his speculation diverges, splinters. Anyways, go ahead.
It doesn't lead one to think that the truth that religion professes has any real chance of actually being the truth. And modern science certainly doesn't in any way support the truth claim that some religions make that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. Thermoluminescence, continental drift, climactic banding in sedimentary rock, ice layers in permafrost, the speed of light, the standard candle, etc., all support the current understanding of the Earth is 4.8 billion years old, and the universe is about 10 billion years older than that. They were not created at the same moment, the same even days apart. As preachers assert without any evidence at all that all of these dating methods are wrong. And although some isolated scientific results have been shown to be wrong, it was science doing the correcting. Religion doesn't do any research, even experimentation. It just asserts that what the Bible says is true. End of story. And every different religion on the planet says that their holy book is true. Well, they can't all be true, but they can all be wrong. And if the Bible is right, why aren't preachers going out and gathering samples from the geologic column, creating tests to show how the age of the rocks can be shown to be 4,000 years old? All of them. And writing papers to those processes and submitting those papers for peer review. That's the thing about science. Anybody can do it. You just need to be able to create a hypothesis, and they've done that already. Earth was created by God a few thousand years ago. You also need to create repeatable experiments to test it, Nope, they haven't done that. And show their work to the peers who can then review, repeat, and confirm the results. Nope, you haven't done that. Apparently, those who don't, they don't think it's worth a risk, worth taking. I mean, but science can and has done all of that for centuries, and all that religions can say is, no, that's not right. And finally, if we accept religion's version of human history, we're denying our own human history, the actual human story. Homo sapiens have endured for 150,000 years, not 6,000. We've survived global catastrophes like the Toba Caldera eruption, the Yellowstone eruption, and an ice age, and have surpassed 4 or 5 other humanoid groups for human supremacy of the planet. Although we haven't fought dinosaurs, we have fought the mighty mammoth, the mastodon, and the saber-toothed tiger. And in spite of this, and in spite of being constantly plagued by superstition and religion, we have managed to develop reason and the scientific method to a finely honed tool for examining and explaining the universe around us.
Got one more call. We're going to go ahead and take it here. Hello, caller. You're on the air. I just want to let you know we only got a couple of minutes left, but I know we took a long time with that last caller. Could you give us a nickname?
Dale.
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 All right. How you doing, Dale? What can we answer for you?
Well, I kind of wanted to get back to the point of origin of life and point out the various types of species we have. I think at some point in history there was a time, maybe during the early bombardment or late bombardment period, where they
Dale?
theorized that it's possible that maybe some of these life chemicals came in by comet or meteor or something like that. And
so like panspermia.
Huh?
Panspermia, that's the theory or hypothesis of what you're talking about, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
that just pushes it back.
Yeah.
At some point, there was different trays put in, different mixtures, by which it caused a separation and a division in the various genetics that composite many different species. And I think that's how we witness a lot of variations in the types of species of life we have here.
Well,
vegetable life, animal life.
Bring the evidence.
That would be another thing I'm going to have to say would require a little more evidence, or evidence, for example. If it did go to a common point, it would only go as far as to giving some light on abiogenesis on Earth, and I think that would be about it. The divergence and variety of life is no doubt the result of the geology here, the climate. I mean, just so many different variables that have influenced the evolution of organisms. But I hate that I got to cut you off. We're coming to the end of our show, and I'm really sorry that we carried on with the last caller so long. And we'll try to get you in next time, all right?
Okay.
All right, but thanks a bunch.
Very interesting argument. I was very intrigued by his view.
All right, thanks a bunch, Dale.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I guess I did ramble on a bit with MC there, but...
Well, that's what it's all about, the conversation. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been a Freethought Forum program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee, bringing you 3 years of free thought and still going strong.
Please send us feedback. Leave us voicemail at 865-272-9060.
Can we put that number up on the screen for you?
Or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. You can see the show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, and at 2200 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
We'd like to send our thanks out to Sam, Jonas, and Forrest for technical support, and to the staff of CTV Knox and all of our callers. Remember to examine your beliefs. If those beliefs are true, then you have nothing to fear from examining them. The truth will out. There was a famous quote that I'm trying to remember who. It was H.P. Lovecraft. He said, if religions were true, then people wouldn't try to stuff the learning down their children's throat. They would just encourage their children to go out and learn the truth as best they can.
Or they wouldn't dress it up like a peacock. Put all these little beautiful things on it.
Like a fishing lure.
Thanks a bunch.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.